Dear Jonti, good evening. How are you doing?
Yeah, very well. Better than the last time we spoke when I was in bed with COVID. I seem to remember.
Good to
Yeah,
know. Good to
yeah,
know.
good. Good. How are you doing?
Keeping well. Thank you, Jonti.
Good. Good.
Thank you also for being here and taking your time to talk with me. During our last meeting, I truly enjoy our conversation and I discover you as an author. And in all honesty, I actually didn't know about your writing. So I went through and educated myself on your website and about your writings. The other fascinating opportunity you gave me was a couple of weeks ago when you gave the lecture at the Leggere Aude, the initiative from Luis Masonic and Sapere Aude.
Yeah.
And that was an eye opener in also in relation to this conversation today. So thank you for that as well. If I had to pick and choose certain elements of that conversation, Jonty, what fascinated me the most is you actually, in your life story, you became a story collector before becoming a writer, as well as you became enlightened before joining Freemasonry. So, question, can you describe how you came about Buddhism and meditation?
I can. It's a funny sort of path. And actually, I have to say, maybe we're using the word enlightened differently because for me, an enlightened human being is someone who has reached the end of the path of human being. In other words, has kind of perfected themselves. And I would not put myself in that category, not by any, not under any circumstances by any means. So, but I think we also have to acknowledge there are certain levels of enlightenment. Even just to know that there's something more than the physical in this world, to kind of have that awakening that there must be something more to life, is a sort of, I don't know, maybe a first step towards enlightenment. The understanding that this physical frame is not everything. In a way, I suppose that is an enlightenment, but I wouldn't say that is enlightenment personally.
Yeah.
How I came to Buddhism, I mean, I don't call myself a Buddhist at all. I've recently, my wife kind of brought me to it because she was involved with a group who are Buddhists, and they have a camp every year. They have a really beautiful camp on Dartmoor in England every year, where people come and it's like a festival, but it's sort of like a Buddhist festival. So there's, you can go to Tai Chi in the morning or Qigong. You can then there's a sort of program of there's silence in the morning. Nobody talks in the morning until lunchtime, which I thought was really weird when I went, but actually it's kind of beautiful. And then there's teachings all day, and there's sitting group meditations and all this sort of thing. So we did that, and I love it. But really, I mean, I've always been interested in world religions. I think I mentioned that in the talk. It's always been a kind of fascinating thing for me. I grew up in a household where there were artifacts and books and interest from those things. Both my parents had kind of Indian connections. My father had been visiting Indian gurus when he was a young man. They'd lived in India for a while. My mum was a yoga teacher, so that there were books about that sort of thing in the house. Buddhism, I think I also describe myself very much as a devotee, and I was described in a book review. Someone called me a devotional Mason, which was an interesting label that I'd never come across. But for me, so I am a devotee. I've always been a devotee. I mean, and I understand that it's a choice. These are all constructs that we choose, and I choose to kind of approach this supreme being that we as Masons believe in a kind of devotional way. But Buddhism for me is slightly different because we have figures like Christ and Krishna and people who kind of embody God, if you like, for us and for their followers. And but Buddha to me is slightly different because he's a man. He's a man showing what a human being can be. And for me, that's a slightly different thing. So, for me, he's a great inspiration for what and an aspiration for what we should aspire to. So I guess in a way, my interest in Buddhism is that we can be that, and that's what we should try and be. I'm not interested in being a Buddhist, and I know it probably sounds extremely arrogant, and I don't mean it like that. But my interest has always been much more how do you become a Buddha rather than how do you become a Buddhist. You know? So anyway, yeah, that meditation, as I say, I kind of grew up with that. My mum taught me the basics of meditation when I was very young. Yeah.
Can I elaborate on your answer, Jonti? It's interesting because you actually specified Buddha. Buddha was Siddhartha as the human aspect and Buddha as the spiritual one. In the transition that the man makes into the spiritual, do you see a path that is affordable, but it's something that any individual can actually achieve, or this is a path that is exclusive only for those special?
No, I think the whole point of it is that that's what we're all aiming for, and we're all on that path. All of us, we're all on that path, whether we know it or not. And you know, it's the most non-exclusive thing in the world. I mean, that's why we're here, as far as I'm concerned. That's what we're doing. We're walking that path, all of us, and we're all at different stages of it. You know.
Exactly. Like on a train station, people arrive, people leave, people actually transitioning into another direction. I totally agree. Light, enlightenment, without giving out too much, as this conversation will be published on the internet. One of the first experiences that a candidate has in a Masonic ceremony is that going through the darkness part of the ceremony, he is stopped and a question is asked to him. What are you seeking for? And the answer is light. But for a person that doesn't do meditation, a person that is not educated into the dimensions that Buddhism or Hinduism or any other type of practice where you seek for a different level of spirituality. How did it sound to you when you had to answer, I'm looking for light?
I think the point is that light is really very much a kind of universal symbol of everything, of life, of knowledge, of literally enlightenment. You know, the idea that, you know, from ignorance to knowledge, you know, these are very, very old basic concepts, part of human aspiration. You know, there's that one of the earlier prayers has the line, "From darkness bring me to light, from ignorance to knowledge." You know, I think again, we talk about exclusivity and inclusivity. This is a very inclusive symbol. You know, the idea of light, from ancient sun worship to you know, all the sort of symbology behind light. This is not a Masonic
exclusivity.
You know, it's not exclusively a Masonic concept, and I think you know, we can put Masonic spins on it, and we do in certain ways, but you know, that concept is universal. I think, yeah.
I agree.
And I think part of all initiatic traditions, I don't think there's a single one that I've ever read about that doesn't have the idea of coming from darkness to light. You know, it's symbolic of birth, isn't it? From the darkness of the womb to the light of the world, and that's a birth, and these are all then symbolic births.
Yeah, I agree. I don't know if you're familiar with the book The Hero of a Thousand Faces from Joseph Campbell. He went around the world and he started interviewing the elderly of the villages in remote areas, Greece, Africa, South America, China, Europe, America, the Indians, and you just name it. And he started collecting those unwritten stories, the legends. And what he did, he tried to find the red line across these stories. And actually, he discovered that all the stories had a stereotype of a hero, a stereotype of initiation, a stereotype of hero's journey, where you go from separating yourself from the family, so leaving the known for the unknown, in order for you, what Ulysses does in the legend, and discover who you are. And you have to do this only if you have the guts to leave your past and face what the future is bringing to you.
Yeah, I think. I mean, this thing of archetypes across the world is it's a very strong idea, and it's something that definitely exists. I mean, I've done a lot of reading about archetypes, and I think they do exist across all cultures. Yeah,
precisely. When I start going through your bibliography, and now I will put the link for the listener later, because it's just fascinating what you have been writing. You describe your writing as, I'm not a real writer. Actually, I collect stories and I put them together. And yet, in your way of writing, it's like you take my hands and you guide me through those stories. How did you develop your style of writing?
That's difficult. I mean, again, I've written since I was little. I used to sneak into my dad's office and put a bit of paper into his typewriter and write letters to fictional people and things like. And I was always a great reader. I mean, I read from a very, very, very early age. Probably too early developmentally, apparently earlier than I should have done. But that's always been my thing. So I don't know. I mean, I think I just drank it in. But also, don't forget, I was a teacher for nearly 30 years, and I think a lot of my writing was geared towards my students. Obviously, I was teaching them to write a lot of the time. I was an English teacher to young kids, so the bones of writing and language and that sort of thing was part of my daily life. And I was writing for specific audiences. So some of the early stuff. I mean, the first thing I had published was a play I wrote for the kids that I was teaching, and I had to produce a play at school. So I wrote one, and that was the first thing that got published. Then I had a little story for kids that was published. I just wrote it for my own kids, for my daughter actually at the time. The Masonic stuff, I don't, it's kind of a bit polemic. It's very opinionated, and I don't know how that came about really. I mean, I think it comes from a style of book that I kind of wanted to read, but I wanted to read one about Freemasonry. Yeah. So I wrote it, again, and it's, I guess the format kind of determines the style to a certain extent, and I know that style suits me. I mean, I'm really good at writing a page. I don't, I find sustained writing quite difficult, quite a challenge, really. It's a discipline that I've only ever been able to do when I've been living a very regular lifestyle. When I do the same thing every day, and I don't always do that. So actually, what I found is a style that I can write in short bursts, and that really, really suits me. And I don't know why. I've just developed this weird sense of I can say what I want to say in a page a lot of the time. So it fits in the book. It's weird. Yeah. Funny.
If you look back at your style, and actually, thank you for reminding that, because you mentioned it during the lecture. You started very young, and this eagerness of taking your father's typewriter and put your thoughts on a paper, etc. If you look back, do you see an evolution of your writing style, or does the audience to whom you're writing to forced you into adapting your style? Because you went from kids to adults to Freemason and a broader audience.
I think I'm quite good at writing for a particular audience. So I'm quite, I've always been quite good with people, I think. And I think that's part of being a teacher, and being a good teacher is obviously you're kind of very sensitive to what people need and what people want, because as a teacher, you're kind of giving that out all the time. You're finding ways to communicate, with 20, 30 different people all day, all the time, So I think that this kind of style has come from that. So seeing an audience and perhaps aiming to try and write for that audience. And at the same time, I think, obviously, I started writing those letters to my dad, on my dad's typewriter when I was, 8 or 9 or 10, and I'm 60 now. So I think as you develop as a human being, obviously you grow into yourself, you become more settled as a person, as a being. So, it's not just my writing that's developed a certain style. I guess my character's sort of settled into a way of being and things. So, and looking back and seeing the pattern in that is as you get older, of course you can. When you're living through it, you don't know that there is. But when you look back, of course, you can see how you got here.
Yeah.
And I think that's as true as with your character as it is with a writing style, or whatever else you do. I think there's we grow into ourselves, I think.
True. Writing is an exercise where you put also yourself up for judgment. I mean, you put your thoughts, you put ideas, and then once that you publish them, you go into two phases. One is, I don't say the struggle, but the complexity of writing something that you're satisfied of, and the second phase is actually the part where the reader goes through your writing, and then the reader has questions or feedback. Now, what I find fascinating is that you didn't just write for adults. You just said it yourself. You wrote also for your kids, like the play, school, etc.
Mhm.
Kids are pretty harsh critics because they actually tell you what goes through their mind, etc. What was the reaction about your writing style and the play? How did they embrace the characters and I don't say the psychology for kids. You can't expect that they enter into a psychology, but how did they embrace the experience that you wrote?
Kids are very trusting, actually, I have to say, and I think they're good at detecting falsity. When if something's not working or not true, they'll spot that. But if it's not like that, then they'll go with it. If you and part of what a teacher does, I think, is through character. My stepfather used to say to me, teaching is character. It's not about knowledge. It's about character. And you teach through who you are, not through what you know. I guess if you're teaching at university or A level, you need to know your subject. But actually, I was mostly teaching younger kids, and they were at a stage of development where actually our relationships were as important and maybe more important than the actual stuff I was teaching them. I think So yeah, they were good. They were very trusting. They were very kind to me. Yeah. And it kind of worked. They made it work. It was a funny thing to do. The first play I wrote was I was teaching in Kenya at the time, and I was looking for.
Yeah.
I was teaching at a sort of British curriculum prep school in Kenya, and their traditional fare of school plays was Oliver and all the things you'd find in an English school. Yeah. And it was a very multiracial school. I mean, we had kids from 36 nationalities, all over Africa, all over Asia, Northern Europe, South and North America. Really everywhere in the world. We had an incredibly mixed student body, and I don't know. I was just looking around for something a bit more closer to home, and actually, I ended up writing a play about the life of Shaka Zulu, who's not that close to home because he was, South Africa, right?
No, exactly.
But still, and it was very interesting because suddenly all the characters they were playing, of course, were Africans,
yeah,
and Zulus mostly, specifically, and of course this was a very, very multiracial cast, playing Zulus, and as I say, they went with it and it worked and it was great. Yeah,
fantastic.
Yeah, funny.
Those are the kids. Then you start addressing adult subject and Masonic subject. And here again, you write with an idea, with a story that is in your head. Do you have any anecdote about feedback about something you wrote that actually you didn't expect from a reader because he interpreted it in a different way?
To be honest, it's hard to remember anything specific. It's always surprising when someone comes back and says, this has really changed my life. I mean, it's incredibly moving. Yeah, I guess it's one of the great lessons of any kind of art, really, isn't it? Because artists create because that's what they do. They can't not really, and then it goes out into the world, maybe, and then other people, then it touches other people, and in a way, that's where it becomes art because it's no longer just personal to you. It's become something that others relate to as well. Yeah. And whether we're looking at a painting or reading a poem or reading a passage from a book, we all again bring ourselves to what we're seeing or reading or feeling. things. And you know, I mean, it's a great privilege to think that people are reading my books, and you know, and that my books are resonating with their lives. That's an amazing thing, really. So, you know, I do. People do write to me occasionally and say it was fantastic. You know, I loved it, and you know, and it's kind of changed me, and I wouldn't be without it. I'm recommending it to everyone, and it's like, you know, I can't tell you enough how great that is when that happens. You know, and I think sometimes also people tend to be, again, you know, whether it's an actor or a painter or a singer or whatever, people tend to stand off and think, oh, there's something special about them. But there's not anything special about them. That's what they do. You know, they're no more special than a bricklayer, or, you know, or a nurse or a doctor. It's not, you know, it's not magic. That's what they do. And, you know, if I don't know, if your room is beautifully cleaned, you would say thank you to the person who cleaned it. And
absolutely,
you know, that's a really good job. And there's no reason not to say that to an artist as well, to a painter who's moved you, or a dancer, or a singer, you know, who's just touched you. You can and you should, because they would really appreciate it, because it can be lonely if you're, you know, if people won't approach you because they're nervous of you, you get lonely. And yeah, so it's, you know, it's a position of great privilege and joy, and you know, I love feedback, and I'm lucky enough to have mostly had positive feedback, which is really, yeah,
brilliant. Thank you for sharing this. Jonti, in your latest book, is Hiram a mirror that you place in front of each one of us, the readers, and ask us to think?
I guess the short answer to that is yes, but in a way, we don't know that much about Hiram, do we? I mean, you know, there are, in sort of Masonic law, we've got two Hirams. We've got Hiram, the king of Tyre, and we've got Hiram Abiff, who was the master builder of the temple, and a craftsman. And you know, so we don't know that much about him. We know that he stood very firmly to his principles,
right,
that he chose, you know, he chose an honourable death over a dishonourable life. But you know, what else do we know? So we're a bit short of heroes, I think, in Freemasonry, in a way. So he's the one we've got, in a way, and we'll you know, I think we have to kind of extrapolate from that. You know, this is a man who was creative and artistic, who, you know, worshipped God through the creation of beauty. You know, there are really good lessons there for all of us. You know, that's a worthwhile thing to do, and that strength of character, that holding fast to one's principles, all of these things, I think, are you know, those are things that are okay lessons to learn, I think. But it's funny, because after I'd sort of handed the book over and it had gone to press, I suddenly thought, I didn't actually mention Hiram that much, really, but once or twice. But no, I think the inference is just that. It's kind of an inference, really, that this is a figure that maybe we need to, or could perhaps look at as someone to emulate. Maybe, I don't know. Yeah.
I don't know. My gut feeling, and please don't misunderstand me. I'm not trying to portray your work in an unfair way. At a certain moment, I got this image of Godot. You know the book Waiting for Godot, and everybody talks about Godot, and Godot is in everybody's mouth, but he's never on stage. And suddenly, everybody's life rotates around this character that is creating this imaginative type of perception. I was actually thinking, well, is Hiram then Godot, the one that inspires without being there, the one that creates an image that everybody feels like he has to replicate, but yet nobody ever seen the person. So
yeah.
You're absolutely right. I mean, Hiram is there as the sort of gate into the journey that you present, and then everything else is about the person that is reading it.
Yeah. Well, you see what you've just done there. You see, you've just taken something from my book and you've just come up with something really profound, and I really like it. Yeah, I think it's really true that you know, that kind of that space allows us to kind of go in and inhabit it.
Yeah.
So yeah, interesting. Well done. Nice idea.
Thank you, Jonti. Jonti, I would like to take one of your words because it's interesting. I love the idea of words, and we choose words for specific reasons. And of course, across ages, words have a different meaning, therefore it needs to be updated, etc.
Mm-hmm.
I find very interesting when you said in Masonry we need heroes. What is a hero in a Freemasonic term?
Well, yeah, I mean, that's the thing. That's exactly what the book is about, isn't it? What is our ideal? What's the ideal that we're aiming for? You see, for me, where our conversation started, for me, people, my ideals are people like the Buddha, and they kind of always have been, and not just people like that, but any people who live a good life, who are inspiring and do good. These are inspiring people. I do feel like Freemasonry is pointing us in a certain direction, and one of the interesting things about Freemasonry is how it asks us to be responsible for our own progress and development. I think this is it's a kind of real key difference with sometimes the religious life, in that we move forward, we develop, we go in a certain direction because we think we ought to, or we're told we should. This is how we're supposed to be. But actually, Freemasonry doesn't do that. It says, this is the possibility of what you can become, and you choose. And so, maybe it's good that we don't actually necessarily have these clear-cut figures. I mean, so because I think we have to fill in that gap, that waiting for God idea. I think it's really, really interesting because I think it's part of our journey is we have to step up and fill that gap for ourselves each time. Yeah.
Now, something that I like when I speak with people like you, like you are, experience, full of energy, across different subjects, and have the capability of writing, because I still recognize as one of the most difficult arts, at least for somebody that doesn't have it natural to write, Jonti, is that once you complete your work, it's done. You move forward, right? You move into the next journey because you have achieved, you sort of circled or squared the circle, if we talk in our terms, etc. So Hiram's is done. What's your next book? Give us an exclusive for the listener.
Well, the thing is that I never know. I don't
plan in advance.
Well, not really. I tend not to kind of push myself like that. Really, I'm not under contract to anyone. I'm not obliged to produce another book or a book a year or anything like that. In fact, this latest one is the first one that's been published by anyone other than myself. So, it's kind of a new experience for me to do that. But, I tend to finish them, and, I work hard at them. I'm kind of obsessive and single-minded, and they, increasingly as it gets closer and closer to finishing and then producing them and what have you, it kind of takes me over. And there's always a period then of letting it go, I suppose. And then, I don't know, ideas just come to me because I finish them and think, because the funny thing is, I like writing, but I'm not very, the discipline of sitting down every day. Again, I don't really push myself. I write when I feel like it, and sometimes, when I've got a book on the go, I will make myself sit down and write a certain amount every day. But it's a bit ad hoc. But then ideas come to me. I mean, I just suddenly will have an idea of that would be good. I'll do that next. And the other day I did have an idea. So I have got an idea that I'm working on. I'm not sure I want to say too much about it. But,
no.
But I've got an idea for a kids' book, actually. For a Masonic kids' book.
Brilliant.
Yeah, which I'm quite excited about.
Brilliant. Oh, that sounds exciting.
Yeah, it's kind of, I mean, the next part of the process is it has to sort of hang around in my head for a while and
So
see how it sort of incubates. Yeah.
Fascinating.
I don't know what the word is. Yeah. So that's nice. Anyway, to have the thing is, I always like to have a project. I don't like sitting around doing nothing. Although I'm quite good at sitting around doing nothing, and I can do it at a push. But I do kind of like having a project on the go. Really.
I can imagine. So you usually, I mean, it usually doesn't exist in writing a book, but you go through a process that takes months, years to write something that you're satisfied, or you don't really have these type of references.
I guess most of them. I don't really have those sort of references. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I guess I can get one done in 6 months. I always think, because this pattern of writing a little book of 100 meditations is kind of the pattern I've got into.
Yeah.
So I sort of know how long that'll take me, and and I sit there and I think, well, if I write 5 a day, I could actually do this in 20 days.
Yeah.
But writing 5 a day, you'd think it's not very much writing. I mean, a writer could write much more than that in a day. But actually, I find it takes it out of me. It's funny just writing 1 page like that, because it's so kind of condensed and sometimes so kind of deep and profound. Even though I say it myself, that sounds a bit presumptuous to say it myself. But sometimes you have to go quite deep and dig quite deep to come up with something like that, and sometimes 1 is enough in a day, but sometimes I can write 4 or 5 straight after the other, so I just have to go with it. But as I say, I sit and do maths in my head thinking I could do this.
I understand. Okay, roughly 6 months. So next interview with Jonti in 6 months. I got it. So I know that I have to book you then. Jonti, fascinating. Now, as we have been going through this, so people, kids may read your book, get inspired thanks to your creativity, your work, your inspiration. Now, question: who does inspire Jonti today as much as yesterday?
I have had people in my life who have inspired me. I guess one of my old teachers inspired me, I have to say. And in fact, funnily enough, he taught me at secondary school in Nairobi. And then when I went back to Nairobi as a teacher at the primary school, he was headmaster of the primary school. So he ended up giving me a job. And in fact, he's the one who taught me how to produce a play, how to direct a play. So he was kind of an inspiration for me. And, I suppose there have been other public figures. When you're young, you get inspired by musicians, and I've always been someone who listens to the words of songs as much as the music. So I was always into the Bobs. I was into Bob Dylan and Bob Marley.
Yeah.
But now, it's not that I feel like there aren't any more heroes. I think there are, but things as you get older, things are not so clear cut. But what I find inspiring, the thing is, we live in times where the sort of temptation, if you like, or the tendency to become divided is so strong, that for me, the people who remember that we are the same, those are the people who inspire me. So the individuals, the groups, the organizations that work for peace, for unity, for togetherness, for humanity, those are the ones that inspire me, really, because that's what I think we need. That's where I'd like to be. In my more kind of fanciful moments, I like to think that that's what my books are doing, because I feel like I want to do something useful in the world. So maybe my books, I can kind of convince myself that my books are also sort of plea for unity and for understanding. But I think, to remain human, I suppose, this thing, as an example, people getting mad because you're not vaccinated, or people getting mad because you are vaccinated. And yet then there are other people who, just respect your choice. You know, and I want to promote the respect of choice. I want us to learn to understand each other, to communicate with each other, to, you know, to not fight. We don't need war. We need peace. So that's what inspires me, and the people who are working for that. And I know lots of them, and I'm very proud to know lots of them. Those are the ones who inspire me.
Fantastic. Nice answer. Thank you, Jonti. Jonti, unfortunately for me, this is the end of our conversation, and it has been a true pleasure, first of all, meeting with you and had the chance to meet you a second time.
Well, and for me,
sorry.
A pleasure for me too. Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity. It's really nice.
I really hope that people they will get all the information during the broadcasting of this video about your website, the books that you wrote, and I hope they will follow the example of taking one of those and then construct their way through your evolution as a writer and as a Mason as well. So thank you very much, and I look forward until the next opportunity to meet with you again, John.
Yes, same. Thanks again.